Hello everyone, welcome to the One Take Show. My name is Kaustubh Srivastav and today we are in conversation with a very special guest. Today I am blessed to talk to Dr. Aditya Sondhi. Dr. Sondhi is a senior advocate working in the High Court of Karnataka and Supreme Court of India. Dr. Sondhi has previously served as the Additional Advocate General for the Government of Karnataka. Sir is also visiting faculty for NLSIU Bangalore, and Sir has a PhD with the University of Mysore. Sir is also a very celebrated TEDx speaker. His lectures are celebrated across many universities across the world. Sir is also a published author with Penguin India with two books already out in the market. And Sir is loves amateur theatre. He loves wildlife. He loves rugby and trust me, so much passion, and today Sir has taken time off his extremely busy schedule to talk about a very relevant topic: litigation and social relevance, the National Law University conundrum. If you like this episode, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, feedbacks, please feel free to reach out to me. Also, do check out the podcast version of this conversation available on multiple streaming platforms. At the end, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's jump right into the discussion. Hello, sir. Welcome to the One Take Show. I am so blessed to have this opportunity to talk to you. It has been an absolute honor to be in touch with you for the past couple of days. To have this opportunity to be in a position to interview you and talk about this amazing topic. I still remember, sir, when we first spoke, you asked me if how did I come to know about Dr. Aditya Sondhi, and my answer was not really very accurate. My answer was not on point because I was really scared, not very prepared. But today, sir, I am. I have an answer. It was the time when I was preparing for CLAT and I watched a video of NLSIU Bangalore, and so you were taking the session and you talked about the art of becoming a lawyer, the pathway of becoming a lawyer. You talked about how NLUs are not necessarily living up to their potential and not living up to the passion that they promised. So, to all my listeners, ladies and gentlemen, today Sir has taken time off his very busy schedule to talk about the topic litigation and social relevance, the big National Law University conundrum. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time off for today. I am so happy that you could take this opportunity.
It's my pleasure, Costa.
Thank you so much, sir. So, you have criticized this model of NLU in the past, and you have brought out the points that you've observed, as in it is not really giving back to the society as it was supposed to. I would like to know what is your opinion on the issue of NLUs not exactly living up to their potential?
Look, let me first begin by saying that NLUs and NLS Bangalore in particular, which is the law school I'm from, has done its bit. So I won't say I'm hypercritical of it. It's done a great deal in many strata. But I have tried to judge whether it's lived up to its potential from one perspective, which was what Dr. Menon had sort of made a clarion call to us when we went for an orientation back in 93, which was he wanted to produce social engineers. And while saying that, I think I don't remember his exact words in depth now, almost 27 years later. But I do think that at one level he intended for a good number of the NLS products to join the bar, because in some ways joining the bar is ipso facto a way of being socially relevant. It's not that it's the only way, it's not that it's always the case, but being part of justice delivery, I do believe at its core has a social relevance to it. And if we judge the sort of output that NLS Bangalore has had, and it's been the sort of template for many other NLUs, and we judge the output that the other NLUs have also had, I don't think they've matched up to that vision. We've become more IIM like, we've tried to make ourselves more recruitable as products. We've tried to make ourselves tick the boxes when it comes to being recruited while on campus, to get into that race of how much money you make up front, how quickly you become partners. And look, I'm not making a value judgment, each to their own, but the default setting has changed. The default setting is not what the original objective, I think, was when the founding father, if you will, Dr. Menon, or the founding parents of the NLU thought up the NLU model. And in that sense, I do think that we've fallen short.
Right, so essentially, there is a running theme that the lawyers are not exactly socially relevant, as in the context of NLU products, or the social relevance is something which is tad bit lacking in the output that the NLUs are producing. I would like to understand, as in, what do you mean by social relevance, and how can litigation as a field can provide that kind of relevance?
Sure. Look, you needn't have to be in litigation to be socially relevant as a lawyer. You can be working. I have classmates who are working in the NGO space with the UN, with rights organizations. Some of them are in writing, and seniors and juniors are in journalism. They're all socially relevant and doing well for themselves. But within litigation, as I said earlier, I think there's a reasonable presumption to be made that your work touches people's lives. After all, what is social relevance? We don't have to make rocket science out of it. If you have an ability to touch someone's life positively, you've done well with your profession. And I think that's where litigation, of course, by its very characteristics, enables that you're able to bring justice to the doorstep of people in need. And that is social relevance. Within litigation as well, there are varying degrees of relevance that lawyers have. Look, there are advocates who are also social activists. Now, their relevance is far greater in a way. Someone like me, I'm not an activist. I'm a professional. I'm a counsel. Hopefully, the work I do matters to people, but I don't think the work I do matters as much as, say, some of my friends and colleagues who are indeed social activists. They're out there on the front. For them, it's not just profession, it's a calling far beyond that. And they achieve that through the process of the court, through the process of law. They also extend their social activism beyond the courts. These are folks who risk their well-being and many times their lives and reputation to be at the forefront of the activism that they partake in. So let me be very clear, it's not that litigation is the mantra for social relevance alone, but it's safe to say that if you're an honest and an effective counsel in court, by default, you should be making a difference to people's lives by bringing them justice. And within that, depending on the sort of career choices you make, your relevance can increase or decrease. It may not be the case in all other streams of the law. I'm not here to look down upon other streams of practice. Corporate lawyers have their own relevance, in-house counsel have their own relevance. But let's be honest that when it comes to life choices and it comes to this canvas of work that you choose, I do believe that courts are there to be socially effective, to be just. And if you're within that system as a counsel, you're in practice, then I think willy-nilly your relevance can be presumed.
Right, so I completely understand your point. In fact, agree with it, primarily because when we as aspirants for the law schools were preparing for CLAT, the coaching classes usually sell the idea of CLAT by telling us how much package most of the NLUs offer us, and essentially how they would sell MBA or any other course. Not again. So point here being that NLU has offered us an opportunity, or it proposes to offer us an opportunity to produce a better or a superior class of lawyers. I'm not really sure of this statement though, but this is something that there is a running presumption amongst NLUs. And is this presumption correct, or are NLUs wrong in taking that higher ground of superiority in a sense?
Look, I don't think one should take a higher ground simply because you've gone to an institution. That by itself is a slippery slope. Of course, institutions stand for a tradition and a history of excellence in some cases they don't. But that again doesn't mean that every product from that institution is necessarily of a certain cut. In the defense of the NLUs, I can certainly say that yes, bright minds go there, but it's not that that's the only place that bright minds go to. I've publicly often said that my best juniors have come from the university law college, the government law colleges, and non-NLUs. So it's hard to say. They come with a drive and a passion which sometimes the NLU products don't have. So that makes a big difference. It's not just your intelligence or acumen that helps you make it in any profession. You've got to also come with a certain discipline and a certain character which your institution may or may not impart to you. But yes, in defense of the NLUs, I will say that the curriculum, the interactivity, the clinical model, the seminar papers, the project papers, the external faculty, the focus on research, on thinking laterally, the exposure to a very wide set and base of material, these are no doubt the strengths of the NLUs, and they certainly equip you as a lawyer academically, theoretically, in a better way. There can't be any denying it, which is really why people write CLAT and first want to go to the NLUs over the others. So let's not undermine that. But having said that, it also comes down to what you're driven by. And if, like you said, quite honestly, that if the CLAT programs and the pedagogy at the law schools is really preparing you to be, for the want of a better phrase, bought out by a firm in your fourth year or your third year or whatever, then you're comparing apples and oranges, because your colleagues in the other law universities may not have that access. They may not be so savvy or employable by international firms. They may, but many times they may not. But to their credit, their focus on the practice of the law, on the realities of the courts, their ability to cope with practice, to work with seniors, to make their mark, I find that capacity is far greater. So look, I don't think anyone can take a moral or an academic high ground here. It's very individualistic. It depends on how each person has done. And that's really why I'm at pains to say that I'm, after all, from the NLS. So look, I do think that I have some moral right to say this. And that's why I'm at pains to say that you need to break a lot of the mind blocks that exist within the NLUs against the practice of the law. I've been candid to say that there are of course a lot of areas of concern within the legal system. I don't have to tell you that. It's acknowledged across the board. But having said that, taking a critical and a constructive look at problems is one thing, and creating mind blocks within the student community is something completely different. And I think that is where the NLUs, I can't really make generalizations again, because my exposure to the other NLUs is academic. I've done guest lectures. I've had, of course, juniors and interns. So I don't know if that's enough to form an opinion. But my general sense is that there is some sort of disinclination towards the practice of the law. And if that is so ingrained institutionally, then it's lopsided, right? It's never going to lead to a real test of your alumni.
Right, sir. I completely agree, sir, on that point, because NLUs primarily are also, like, I am from National Law University, Ramanaloya National Law University, Lucknow, and a very dominant culture in our university is the fact that judiciary is a very predominant area where a lot of students engage into, and we do that. But the problem is that still a lot of students measure the success of RML itself amongst all the universities as well is how much placements do we get amongst corporate houses or firms, and if the placements are not very high, possibly the universities are not performing that well. But when it comes to litigation, sir, there is a continuous, a very constant theme that first generation lawyers, or most of the students who do not come from a backing, do not necessarily make it big in litigation, although it has been refuted time and time again by multiple examples. And we have those stalwarts in picture, but still that fear does not go away. So when we talk about the social relevance, we talk about litigation, and we talk about law students getting into law school for the ethical reasons for studying law, this becomes a challenge, and I would love to know your opinion on the same.
Yeah, see, when you start judging institutions based on things like placement, packages, etc., that's the kind of the India Today model of ranking institutions based on these objective criteria. Maybe those are the only criteria readily available. The assessment of a practicing lawyer is far more subjective. You can't judge a counsel's success based on these criteria, based on income alone or what chamber they're in. Those are not the yardsticks. Firstly, it's a long haul. It takes time to establish yourself and make your mark. Secondly, it's not really milestone driven. Like I've always said, what is the milestone for a counsel? Yes, designation as a senior is one. If you're appointed in a law officer to the government, that's possibly another. But those, again, don't necessarily mean success or otherwise in the profession. Success in the profession is really the reputation you carry. And that's a very subjective kind of thing. It's very difficult to assess people on. And secondly, as I said, that assessment can't happen when you graduate. Your reputation is earned not even over years, sometimes over decades, as we're all finding out the hard way. So therefore, you can't make these sorts of criteria-based judgments when it comes to the practice. The other thing is, I don't think institutionally there is a mechanism to support and encourage the first generation lawyers that you rightly mentioned when they take that leap of faith to join the bar. Look, rankings and so on aside, even if there are 5 students in a batch who are getting into practice, there's a good chance that maybe 2 out of those 5 will be first generation lawyers. And they need a bit of hand holding. I'm saying this from my experience. I missed that. When I graduated from NLS, I didn't have that institutional support or morale boost that I would have liked in those hard years. And those were very, very hard years. Getting into practice is never easy for anyone. In fact, let's not just confine it to first generation lawyers. Even somebody from within a legal family is going to have to find his or her feet up front. Maybe there's a bit of cushion when it comes to inheriting a practice and inheriting some briefs and so on, but the challenges are real. And that's where the institutional support has to come in. You have to encourage these career choices. You have to stand by them. I think there's a scope for counseling needed. There's a good chance that people may find it too hard and want to quit and get out. Then who answers for that minority? You may be very well top of the pops with your sort of international placements and your scholarships and so on. But then your institutional sort of responsibility also lies with those that need some support up front, right? And therefore, I think while this fixation with rankings and ratings and so on, I think is here to stay, I think that institutional faculty needs to take a look at itself, alumni needs to take a look at itself and say, look, there is this category of kids passing out from the law school who don't have all the answers, and they need some kind of moral support. They need a bit of what's the word? Maybe some inspiration, if you will, to keep them going. And I think that is the loophole that needs to be plugged immediately.
Right, sir. That is very important for me personally to understand, because I also come from, I will obviously be a first generation lawyer in my entire family, in fact, in my entire lineage, if I'm being very sure of that. But the point here, sir, is again that, as you have mentioned in multiple of your interviews before, that most of the students who come from NLUs are not really humble, or they need to be humble. The humbleness is very important when students enter into litigation. They're fresh aspirants and they join a chamber. They need to be humble. They need to train themselves into particular areas. Sir, I would like to know your opinion as in a fresh law aspirant who enters the industry and who tries their hand at litigation. what all things should they be prepared with or can prepare during law school so that they become more suitable candidates for the chambers they go and work for?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you said humility, and I've always been big on it. Whether you like it or not, the practice of the law will humble you. So you might as well come in humble on your own rather than be humbled in court, as can happen frequently. But that apart, look, it's a vexed question. There are many aspects that one can talk about. But to cut a long answer short, I can say in retrospect there are a few things that you can get right, and I do believe that internships with advocates, with senior counsel, with even clerkships with judges are an important way of getting a feel of the practice. But more than ticking those boxes, I think it's the attitude that's important. And I'm saying this from experience. You can go into an internship in court with an open mind, wanting to see what it's like and wanting to like it, or at least try to like it. Or you can go into it saying, I already hate this. Let me be done with it. Let me go and then write an article on what's wrong with the profession, and then pack my bags and say tata goodbye to courts and look at another career option. And I'm being very honest. I've seen this a lot. I've seen it with peers. I've seen it with juniors, interns, whatever. That you come with a chip that could come from arrogance. It could also come from fear, that you're just not ready to take it on, and you want to convince yourself that you tried. So you do this odd internship here or there, you go looking for mistakes, and then you highlight them, and then you say, this is exactly what the system's about. And then you kind of psych yourself into believing that court is not for you. And I think that attitude is really where the younger students at the law school need to be spoken to. They need to be told that don't go into court with predisposed opinions. Of course, you'll see things wrong, but you may be very pleasantly surprised. You may actually love the atmosphere there. Now, of course, I've been speaking about the lack of physical hearings in court these days with COVID, how that, I think, dilutes the very efficacy of our system if we take that away. But that apart, the thrill of court, the interactivity with clients, with colleagues, with clerks, with seniors, the brainstorming that goes on, you need to be able to see it for what it is. So I won't answer your question completely in terms of saying what skills, because, honestly, that is a 1 hour talk probably I have to give you. But I would say this: if your listeners are particularly from that group of budding lawyers who are fence sitting, who are still not sure whether to get into the bar or not, I would say, first get your attitude right. Be a bit open about things. Try and absorb, try and learn, try and watch the right examples. You'll get dime a dozen wrong examples as well, but try and look for what's right with the system. And when you do that, you may find a degree of engagement and a connection which will tell you that, yes, I not only I can do this, but I may actually love to do this. And believe me, that comes from the mentality of the intern or the student. And to me, that would be the one message that I would like to convey.
Right, sir, because that is a very important message I take away for myself as well. I completely understand that in multiple internships and with our professors who have highlighted the fact that law students should spend a lot more time in courts than they spend in classrooms. This principle has been a running thought and is not really highlighted much with our law schools in particular. One of the major points that I have come across talking to a lot of my seniors have been that it is a better way out that you first work with a law firm in order to somehow learn a superior work culture, which I'm again not sure of as a sentence, but a superior work culture, and then come back to litigation to try your hand at. So litigation being an uncertain field. So this is one of the questions that come up in our discussions more often as we try to somehow make sense of the career path that we are trying to enter into. Do you have any opinion on the same?
I guess this is a Freudian slip. It suggests that litigation is an inferior work culture of some sort. I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from. It's not about superior or inferior, honestly. It's about a different work culture. A work culture in a firm, not that I've ever worked at a firm really, but the work culture at a firm and in a chamber is diametrically different. Again, it's not to say which is better or worse, but I do believe that the culture of a chamber is better suited to the practice of the law. And remember, your hardest days are your early days, and you want to get those out of the way as quickly as you can. So if you're going to be distancing yourself from that check, those hard tests, by being in a firm based on a work culture that you're absorbing, then I actually believe you're undercooked already, you're losing time. And whether you come to the bar at 22 or at 28, you're going to face the same challenges. If anything, when you're older, I believe your challenges would be greater, because you'll also have a psychological pressure that you're already, say, 28 or 30. You're still a fresher, you're in no man's land. And therefore, I don't know where your seniors are coming from. Maybe they have a perspective on it, but in my limited understanding of the profession, the earlier you get into it directly and neck deep and do it in a chamber, the better your odds are. In fact, a work culture at a firm can spoil you in a way. It may change your grain, for the want of a better word. It may make you a different type of lawyer, which may make you very well suited to the firm side of practice, don't get me wrong. But you may then again find it very difficult to fit into this side of things, where the demands are very different. Your professional and your ethical demands at the bar, especially when you're an arguing counsel, as opposed to a briefing counsel, are very sharp. And that instinct has to be developed the hard way. So my personal advice would be to get into the deep end of things straight away and first, and judge for yourself. Maybe the converse is possible, and I've said this. Look, if you do 2 years at the bar, let's say, and you genuinely dislike it for whatever reasons, there's no shame in saying, look, I tried and I need to get out. There's no money, or there's no joy, there's no satisfaction, whatever. And then go into a firm and then develop that superior work culture, as you said, so be it. But this roundabout way, I'm not sure at all, to be honest. It doesn't convince me.
Right, so I completely understand. That is why I was very careful. In fact, I'm still skeptical of the sentence of superior work culture, because this comes as one of those running narratives in the law schools, that corporate firms give you the better work culture and the last long hours and your superior somehow environment, and which is not something I do agree with, but is a running narrative which is quite very dominant when it comes to the interactions. So
see, I'll just quickly add to this. It also comes down to the kind of counsel you want to be. Now, I've never had a firm. I've always been a solo practitioner, and that was a choice that I made, that I wouldn't have partners. So, yes, firms certainly do have some good governance practices to them. They have perhaps possibly better management skills. They're able to administer their work and manage their files better. Fair play. And if you're looking at setting up a firm, a litigation firm, as it were, with partners, and or a full service firm which also does some litigation, which people do, maybe that's the way forward for you. That's up to you. It's a life choice. But let me assure you that if you're looking at counsel practice and solo counsel practice, then this option is off the table for me. You've actually got to then invest your time and energy on learning this side of the practice, which may not be as sophisticated as some think, but there's, let me assure you, a heck of a lot for you to learn and do when you run your own chamber. So the more you give it, the better you'll be.
Right, sir. So as this is very important, and this brings me to my last question, and also probably the most important and the most selfish question here. Every time we talk to our seniors about entering into litigation, one constant advice is that you find a good mentor or find a good senior who you idolize and you can constantly learn from, and stick with that senior for some time. COVID-19 has given law students like me an opportunity to have this conversation with the leaders and the luminaries in the field like you, sir. But in general, if we try to enter the field of litigation and try to find internships, or for example, after graduating, start working with the seniors, is there a way we can find good mentors, or how can we make sure that we are actually looking in the right direction in order to find a good mentor to give us this opportunity of grooming?
See, it's not easy. These are not decisions you can make simply based on what you see or read or hear about people, because sometimes reputations also can be deceptive. The the right way to do it is actually hands-on. Internships are a very good way, I also believe, of helping you find your chemistry with a senior. If you find that the work ethic and the work style of an office suits you, then you've already had a good start, because you then hit the ground running when you join that chamber. But having said that, there needn't be too much pressure. For a start, you can have more than one mentor, and your mentor need not be your immediate senior as well. I've always told my juniors, you may have something to learn from me, yes, but you will certainly have a lot to learn from others at the bar by observing them in court, observing their value systems, their style of advocacy, their preparation, and their moral courage above all else. So you may actually find yourself having multiple mentors, and that's the beauty of the profession. Let me tell you that, because it's an open profession, and that's why I say I hope it stays open. I hope it stays in court, so that the younger bar can watch not just their senior, but can watch multiple seniors and learn and unlearn from them. And therefore, don't be under pressure in that sense that you have to get this answer right once and for all. Yes, you must find a senior. I was privileged to work with my senior, Mr. Holla. He's a mentor of a different sort. He throws you in the deep and asks you to learn. It's a very direct way of teaching juniors the skills. But mentors are of different sorts. So don't get too weighed down by it. It's important that you join a competent and an ethical senior. A lot of your learning will also come from within. I mean, mentors, yes, but this is also a very, very introspective profession. It's not that someone can just tutor you on it. Your real learning, honestly, will not happen as much as it does when you're on your legs arguing. That's where you're really switched on. Your interaction with the bench, you're arguing cases in an open court with opponents, being watched with the stakes that are there depending on the outcome of the case. That is what really teaches you. So yes, keep your eye on the ball in terms of finding an office that broadly meets your expectations, not just an office, but a senior within that office. I want to make that clear. Even if you join firms, Vagera, it's fine. But at the end of the day, you must attach yourself to an individual practitioner, because that's where the symbiotic flow of learning happens. But beyond that, you've also got to be a dry sponge and absorb from everywhere around you. And most importantly, you've got to learn your stuff on your own. Nobody can spoon feed you in the practice.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I believe this conversation is going to help so many of my listeners, and not just my listeners, me personally as well. I think I've had a wonderful time. This is one of the most constructive conversations I've had. Thank you so much, sir. I hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you. I enjoyed chatting with you, Kaustubh.
Thank you so much, sir.